investigation. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. I started my podcast in November of 2023, and ever since that day, my most requested case is the case of Carol Ryan. Coincidentally, the same week that I started Residue, Syracuse.com released a podcast by Katrina Tulloch titled Firecracker: The Murder of Carol Ryan. You can find Firecracker on Wondery. I will also put a link to the podcast in my show notes. Firecracker was used as my main source for this episode. Definitely check it out. High praise to Katrina Tulloch. It was a great podcast. She's got some really great interviews in it. If you are a first-time listener to Residue, think of my style more like Mr. Ballin or Morbid -1. Thank you for joining me for episode 61, titled The Day the Music Died, Justice for Carol Ryan. As always, listener discretion is advised. The case of Carol Ryan, an unsolved murder in upstate New York, remains a chilling and perplexing mystery. In 1996, Carol Ryan, a 42-year-old woman from Eastwood, New York, was discovered unconscious after suffering severe injuries from a firework explosion. Authorities believe she may have been intentionally targeted because the device that was used was a commercial-grade firework, which did suggest a deliberate and brutal attack. The investigation has yielded few leads, and despite efforts from law enforcement and the public, no one has been arrested or charged in connection with her death. Carol Ryan's case stands as a stark reminder of the unresolved dangers lurking in seemingly ordinary places, and her family continues to seek justice and answers. Carol Ryan was born on the 4th of July, 1954. With fiery red hair and a spitball personality, Carol was nicknamed Firecracker. Raised in Boylston, New York, a small town with a population of only about 500, Carol attended school in Sandy Creek, New York, and volunteered at a local daycare. She loved to sing and she loved to dance. It reminds me of that opening scene in Girls Just Want to Have Fun when Sarah Jessica Parker's character, Janie, is standing in front of her class at her new school, introducing herself, and she just says, "And I love to dance." That's how I imagined Carol Ryan as I researched her case. At 17 years old, Carol becomes pregnant with her son, Sean. And oh my, how Carol adored her son. Sean was her entire world. After Sean's birth, Carol soon dropped out of high school and was a dedicated and doting mother. Sean, now about 53 years old in 2025, describes his mother as his best friend. She made childhood beautiful, a single mom who adored her son and filled their home with love and music, and sometimes the comforting scent of freshly baked treats. Sean says that his mother loved to bake fudge, cookies, and cheesecake. Carol was a constant source of support and affection, making sure her son always felt safe, valued, and cherished. Music was a key role in their home, with her favorite bands being Bob Seger, Pink Floyd, and Led Zeppelin on constant rotation, whether it was her dancing to Janis Joplin or singing along to her favorite songs or simply having music fill the background of daily life. There would have been a sense of rhythm and harmony in the air. The sound of music could have been an avenue for connection, a way to communicate, to share feelings, and to create memories. Carol took 10-year-old Sean to his first concert at the New York State Fair. the Charlie Daniels Band. Carol's life was one of hardship and fleeting joy. She met Patrick Ryan when her son Sean was only 3 years old, and soon after, the abuse began. Sean describes Patrick as a, quote, brutal man, a fitting description of a man who would turn his anger on both Carol and Sean, leaving scars that would last a lifetime. Carol tried to protect her son, but the violence from Patrick was relentless, and the weight of it all wore on her. Carol's own struggles with drinking added to the chaos of her life. She had a history of public intoxication, which only made things harder for her to hold on to stability. She worked at the Dietz factory where she made tire pressure checkers, but she never stayed at any job for too long, always moving from one to the next. By the time of her death, she was unemployed and living in Eastwood, New York, in the Grant Village apartment complex. But Carol wasn't living alone in Grant Village. She lived with her cat, Bird. Carol had an ex-boyfriend named Bobby McGee. Very fitting for Carol since she was obsessed with Janis Joplin. Neighbors said that they were always fighting. And the day before the murder, Bobby McGee was at her apartment banging on the door. In 1996, Bobby was 36 years old. He was 6 years younger than Carol. But on the night of her murder, Bobby McGee was not out with Carol Ryan. Carol went out on her own. She went out bar hopping in Syracuse, New York. The evening began with a phone call to her brother Harold. That was around 10:19 p.m., a conversation that would become one of the last moments anyone would hear from Carol. After her call to her brother Harold, Carol continued her night out, making her way through various bars in the area. By 12:05 a.m., she was seen at Dinosaur Barbecue, a very popular local spot still to this day. From there, she ventured back toward the Eastwood area, another neighborhood that she frequented. Around 1:30 a.m., Carol was spotted at the East Room Bar. She spent about half an hour there, playing pool and enjoying a quiet night. The bar wasn't crowded at that time, and the bartender noted that Carol was there alone. Carol remained at the East Room until closing time at 2 a.m. Before she left the East Room, Carol was asking anyone if they wanted to go out to breakfast, and she said she would even buy. No one wanted to go. It is now 2 a.m., and in Syracuse, New York, back in my bar hopping days, going out to breakfast at 2 a.m. was a normal occurrence. We had some pretty great diners around this area. So Carol leaves the East Room. It is a little after 2 a.m. It remains unclear if she walked home or possibly hitchhiked. But what is certain is that Carol left the East Room on her own and was last seen alone heading into the night. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Her body was discovered later under the most mysterious circumstances, leaving questions that would linger for decades about what truly happened in those early morning hours. The next morning, September 1st, 1996, a 46-year-old fisherman comes across Carol's body face down and motionless on the road. Carol was nude and she had severe injuries. This fisherman's first thought was she must have been in some sort of car accident. On September 1st, 1996, Carol was found in Jamesville, New York. And to give you a little clarity on how far away that is from Eastwood, it's about a 12 to 15 minute drive. Definitely not an easy walk, and you have to remember Carol didn't drive. Police arrive on the scene. Carol is still alive. She is immediately transported to Upstate University Hospital. But sadly, Carol would die 5 hours after being found. The medical examiner's report revealed the sheer horror of Carol's final moments. When she arrived at Upstate University Hospital, she was in critical condition, her body showing signs of extreme trauma. According to the autopsy, which spanned 22 pages, Carol's injuries were severe and included bruising and abrasions to her face, arms, and legs. Her private areas were described as destroyed, and there was a significant damage to her pelvic region, including a ruptured bladder and broken bones. Scrapes on her head and around her mouth, as well as marks around her chest, suggested both physical and sexual assault. The report also noted a destructive injury to her lungs and fractured ribs, all of which indicated the immense violence she had endured before her death. Investigators believed this was a male suspect, and Carol was first beaten and then dragged to this spot. Someone planted an explosive device inside of Carol Ryan and detonated it. Onondaga County District Attorney Bill Fitzpatrick said, "It is an especially evil, sadistic kind of person that would commit a crime like this." The medical examiner on Carol's case said that Carol looked really beaten up, with bruises and abrasions on her face. Her lower extremities and her private area was destroyed. The 22-page autopsy report stated injuries such as a scrape on Carol's head about 5 inches long, injuries in mouth, around mouth, marks on nipples, scrapes on arms and legs, dragged at some point on her back and buttocks, major destruction in the pelvic region, bladder destroyed, bones broken, lungs injured, ribs fractured, bruises on ribs, hands had bruising. Carol's injuries were so severe that some of the ER doctors were given counseling. The circumstances surrounding Carol's death shocked the local community and left behind more questions than answers. ER doctors who had been part of her care were deeply affected and were provided with counseling after witnessing the severity of her injuries. One of the most unsettling details from the autopsy was the presence of bruising on her hands, possibly indicating she had struggled with her attacker. The investigation would reveal little in terms of forensic evidence, aside from the obvious signs of a violent assault. The brutality of the crime and the absence of clear leads made this case a dark and lasting mystery that still haunts investigators and those who knew Carol. Despite the many eyewitness accounts that put her in various locations, no one knew that Carol's life would tragically end not long after she left the East Room bar. The mystery of how she traveled or who she might have encountered remains unsolved. What began as a casual night of bar hopping ended in tragedy, and questions still linger to this day about the events that transpired between 2 a.m. and the discovery of Carol's murder. The murder of Carol Ryan has long been shrouded in mystery, with several individuals emerging as potential suspects over the years. Here is a look into some of these individuals, their relationships to Carol, and their possible involvement in her tragic death. First, we have Bobby McGee, Carol's ex-boyfriend, and we all know the boyfriend, the spouse, the ex are always suspect number one. As I stated earlier, neighbors said that Bobby and Carol were always fighting, and he was at her apartment the day before the murder, banging on her door. Bobby was brought in about half a dozen times to be interrogated, and he was ruled out. Bobby didn't drive. He walked or hitchhiked. He wasn't pursued by police because at the time he was living with a couple and he had no access to a car. He was also very emotionally distraught when the police questioned him. Bobby McGee died in 2012 at age 52. Next up, we have Walter Krakowski. Walter was Carol's boyfriend at the time of her death. He was known to have been sneaky and manipulative. He is said to have put Carol through hell. Sean, Carol's son, harbors deep resentment toward Walter with some disturbing anecdotes shared about his behavior. Sean says that one particular incident that stands out involves Walter using a quarter stick of dynamite to blow up squirrels, which Carol found deeply upsetting. This violent display of aggression raised concerns about his temper and his potential for harm. Tragically, just 2 or 3 months later, Carol was found dead after an explosion. While Walter passed away in 2002, before any formal charges could be made, the nature in which Carol was murdered leaves this lingering sense of suspicion about his involvement. Suspect number 3, Patrick Ryan, Carol's ex-husband. Patrick was Carol's ex-husband, and Patrick died in 2006 from hepatitis, and this added another layer of complexity to this case. Patrick had been married to a woman named Teresa at the time of Carol's death, but their relationship did not paint a picture of harmony. Patrick had a volatile temper and was often verbally abusive towards his daughter and his wife, Teresa. Patrick's aggressive tendencies, his strained relationships with Carol, with Sean, raised questions about the role he may have played in the dynamics leading up to Carol's death. All 3 of these suspects were close to Carol, and all 3 of these suspects have passed away. Now, these 3 suspects sound like this could be it. This could be our guy. Something that always bugged me about this case was the fact that Carol's nickname is Firecracker. Somebody killed her using an explosive device. This has to be someone that knows her and knows her on a very deep level. This has to be somebody that was angry with her. In my mind, I just figure it has to be someone that knew Carol personally. To know her nickname and then to murder her in that way? Come on. But in the ongoing investigation into the murder of Carol Ryan, several additional suspects have come to light, each with unique connections or suspicious behaviors surrounding this case. While none have been conclusively tied to the crime, these individuals have raised questions among investigators and journalists alike. The number 1 suspect is named Andrew LaFleur. Andrew died in 2018. But he was mentioned in the Firecracker podcast as a possible suspect. His ex-wife Lois spoke about their tumultuous relationship, describing Andrew as a man with a criminal history and one who was violent towards her during their marriage. He had multiple run-ins with the law, including charges for tampering with a witness, grand larceny, and burglary. In March 1980, he was convicted of attempted first-degree sexual abuse and burglary in Onondaga County, which were part of a series of serious offenses. In 1985, he served time for attempting to steal guns. Interestingly, Andrew's name surfaced in connection to fireworks, a topic that has come up in the investigation into Carol's murder, obviously. Around the time of Carol's death, Andrew had applied for a job at Grant Village in Eastwood, where Carol lived. Though he was a known troublemaker with a violent past, investigators did not immediately link him to Carol's death, but his criminal history and proximity to the area, that made him a figure of interest. Our next suspect in the murder of Carol Ryan is referred to as the unnamed suspect in the podcast, Firecracker. This suspect's identity has not been publicly revealed due to an ongoing investigation, but his actions on the night of Carol's murder have drawn attention. According to reports, he caught a ride from Syracuse to Jamesville on the night Carol was killed. A barmaid reportedly gave him a ride home, and while he was never arrested in connection with the crime, his suspicious behavior raised alarms. The unidentified man made an odd statement to journalist Katrina Tulloch, claiming that the situation, quote, ruined his name and his life. When asked if he knew Carol Ryan, he denied it, stating that she was, quote, no friend of mine. Though he was not initially a prime suspect, the circumstances of his ride and his odd response to media inquiries have kept him in the spotlight. The fact that he cannot be named due to the ongoing investigation has only added to the intrigue surrounding him. The next suspect is the most intriguing suspect in the Carol Ryan case. This is also an unnamed suspect. The podcast Firecracker refers to this person as the stranger. This suspect was at the East Room on August 31st, 1996, the night that Carol was last seen alive. And according to Carl Kruger, the lead detective in this case, this individual was one of the last people known to have interacted with Carol before her murder. A tip from a witness led police to investigate this man, who claimed he had been at home all night with his girlfriend. However, when detectives asked the girlfriend about the timeline, her account did not match this suspect's. Further investigation revealed that the suspect knew specific details about the case that had not been made public, suggesting that he had inside knowledge of the investigation. Despite his alibi, the lies told by both the suspect and his girlfriend raised red flags, making him a prime person of interest in this case. While his identity remains unknown, the suspicious nature of his statements and the witness tip have placed him at the center of the investigation. If he was indeed involved in Carol's murder, the case may hinge on uncovering more about his whereabouts and actions that night. These additional suspects, while not conclusively linked to Carol Ryan's murder, provide critical leads that continue to shape this investigation. As authorities dig deeper into their backgrounds and their testimonies, the hope remains that new evidence will eventually lead to a resolution of this chilling case. Anyone with information is asked to call the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office at 315-435-3051. The murder of Carol Ryan remains a chilling reminder of the dangers that can lurk even during the seemingly most ordinary of nights. According to a CNY Central August 31st, 2016 article, detectives are hoping with the passage of time someone will be willing to come forward with information that just may be the key to solving this cold case. Carol's son Sean says, "Just help my family. I have 3 kids now. They are always asking questions about who their grandmother is, how she died. They are absolutely the hardest questions I have ever been asked in my life." Sean says, "It's like a never-ending nightmare nobody should have to go through. It wasn't just my mom who lost her life that day. It was me too." According to a 2023 Syracuse.com news article, after Carol was murdered, Sean was allowed to go through her apartment and gather her belongings. In her closet, he found a note in her handwriting. It says, "When something is good, it doesn't die. It changes shape or form, but it doesn't die." Carol Ryan sang with the rhythm of her soul and danced with the fire of her spirit. Her joy, a melody that could never be silenced. Though her life was stolen, her heart still beats in the songs she left behind. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Residue. I appreciate you all so very much. Residue is created, hosted, produced, edited, researched, written by me, Chrissy Champagne. If you enjoyed Residue, just hit that follow button at the top of your screen wherever you are listening. And if you wanted to follow me on any social media, I'm at Instagram, Residue Podcast, Facebook, Residue, a True Crime Podcast. I am on TikTok, but I don't know if we're going to be having that for much longer. But that is also Residue Podcast. And just a little reminder, leaving a review for any of your favorite podcasters is always the best thing that you can ever do to help out a show. You know I totally dig all of you, and I cannot wait to see you back here on Tuesday next week. Don't forget, stay safe and stay paranoid.